We welcome everyone to the Harvard Risk Management Corporation's special webinar this morning, Managing Risks of the 21st Century. Our presenter today is Certified Risk Management Consultant and President of Harvard Risk Management Corporation. Please welcome Mr. Mike Riches.
Well, thank you very much. And again, Mike Riches joining this webinar here from Dallas, Texas this morning. Very excited to go over this information with those who are joining this webinar from across North America. And I'll tell you what, folks, right now it is a very important time to be discussing some of the risks that businesses are facing. And that's what we do at Harvard Risk Management. We help businesses identify some of those risks, and that's what we want to just spend some time on over the next few minutes this morning is discussing some of those risks that exist today that may not have existed in times past, and then again, how to effectively manage those risks. And that's something that you'll hear us talk about quite a bit. At Harvard Risk Management, we're obviously not about eliminating risk. Without risk, there would be no reward. Obviously, risks are going to exist, but how do you manage that? How do you budget for it? How do you increase your business's productivity despite the risks that may face your company? And that's certainly what we're going to talk about this morning. Again, risk of the 21st century. Let's just start by identifying some of the things that exist in today's world, some of the risks that you and I might face in business today that we may not have faced in years past or in generations past. Think about the changes in our society and some of the things that have come about because of the advancement of technology, because of social changes in our society and in our nation here and across North America. Look at some of these examples: cyber risks, piracy. These are problems that businesses didn't have 50 years ago. Think about the increase in legal liability, the increase in lawsuits against businesses. And today, if you're in business, you have to be legally minded. You have to be constantly thinking about what kind of exposure is this decision going to give my company. Think about the climate and environmental changes. How does that affect businesses across North America? You know, if you had a snow shoveling business in Dallas here, that wouldn't have been very profitable this last year. We didn't have any snow. There are changes that are affecting businesses in that way. Think about the increase in fraud. And not to be too nostalgic, but quite frankly, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, even 20 or 30 years ago, there just didn't seem to be the risk of fraud that there is today. I mean, dishonesty is obviously higher. There is more fraud, so you and I have to prepare for that. Think about the changes in foreign affairs. What happens to your business when the United States enters into a war? I mean, those are all decisions that you and I have to examine, and all risks that we have to be able to evaluate, and then again prepare for. Think about the risk of inflation. Here's a big one: a decrease in employee productivity. Do employees work as hard today as they would have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago? What are some of the things that are happening in an employee's life to decrease that productivity? And again, what are some things that you and I can do to help prepare for that? And that's really what we're about at Harvard Risk Management. What we do is we help businesses understand, number one, some of the risks that are out there. That's what we're going to be spending a few minutes on this morning, identifying, taking a few of those risks that were mentioned, and just talking about them, understanding what kind of cost that can have on a company, what kind of impact that can have on these risks can have on a company. We then help companies identify, are these risks applicable to them? And obviously there are some risks that there are some things that are happening in our global society that are not going to impact your particular business. So we help identify the risks that would have an impact on your business. And then here's the main key: we help find solutions. And that's what we pride ourselves on at Harvard Risk Management, is our ability to go out into the marketplace, find the best solutions that exist, and then bring those solutions to our clients, saving our clients the time and money and energy of having to go out and find those solutions on their own. We want to bring those to the table. We're very proud of the solutions that we help offer, that we've gone out there, the extensive market research that we have done to find not only solutions, but again, the best solutions for your business. And so let's get into some of these. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the risks and getting into some detail about some of these risks that again, our businesses are going to face. Something that was really that we didn't pay much attention to, and not that it didn't exist, but we just didn't spend a lot of time talking about data breaches up until a few years ago. You know, quite frankly, with the advent of the internet, with companies with data of companies being all online like it is today, the risk for data breaches certainly is greater than ever before. That doesn't mean that 20 years ago, if someone wanted to, they couldn't have breached a company's data. I mean, obviously that risk has always been there, but it absolutely has increased over recent years. Here's just a few numbers that I think are interesting. If you take last year, 2011, there's a nonprofit organization called Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. You can go to their website, privacyrights.org. Privacy Rights Clearinghouse that reports when a company makes a data breach public. So here's your numbers from 2011. 535 breaches, that's more than one per day, were reported by Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, involving, check this number out, over 30 million sensitive records. So just last year alone, there were 30 million records that were reported having been breached. Now that's just 2011. If you go back to 2005, and this just happens to be the year 2005, January of 2005, when Privacy Rights Clearinghouse started reporting breaches. So that's just from their website, from their records, and all they're doing is reporting breaches that again, companies have made public. The total number of sensitive records that have been breached since 2005, over 500 million. I mean, that's a lot of records. As you can imagine, that's a lot of companies that have lost sensitive data. I mean, this is a huge risk to businesses. Now, those are records that have been reported. What about the unreported breaches? What about a company that didn't report it, even though it's law, even though that's what you and I are supposed to do? What about a company that said, you know what, we're not going to report that. We're not going to make it public. We're going to try to cover it up. Could that be 5 times, 10 times, 20 times the amount of reported breaches? Again, the number there is unknown. And that's why we say data breaches pose today one of the biggest threats to businesses. Here's where the threat of a data breach can really affect your company, is the liability that comes with that. Not only the legal liability, and that certainly exists, the liability of being sued. I mean, if a customer's data is breached, that customer then goes on to fight the effects of identity theft, for example. That customer certainly has legal grounds to sue that company that lost their sensitive information, especially if they can show where that company was not doing everything that should be done to protect that information. But it's not just the legal liability, it is the liability of your reputation being damaged. See, what happens when you make a breach public and then your customers say, I don't want to do business with that company anymore? Those are all things that a company has to consider in protecting data. So what are companies doing today to protect that sensitive information? Obviously, an investment in substantial internet security is very important. Protecting that information from online hackers, from again, people that are trying to breach that data, get access to that data. Here, look at the second bullet point there, the education of employees and the implementation of policy. You talk about the legal liability that comes with a data breach. Well, if that happened to my company, if all of a sudden someone wanted to bring a lawsuit against my business and say that my employees were not protecting that sensitive information, that my company was not protecting that customer sensitive information, I would want to be able to show, in order to establish an affirmative defense for my business, I would want to be able to show that I educated my employees, that I trained them on protecting sensitive data, that we had appropriate internet security in place, but that I didn't just stop there, that I implemented policies, that we were making a good faith effort to protect that information. I would want to show that I was shredding documents, that I was again, going above and beyond even what is required. If I want to reduce my exposure, I would want to go even above and beyond what is required by law to show that I was making a good faith effort, again, to protect that sensitive data. Document shredding, definitely a part of that. And then what about employee and vendor background screening? That I was screening my employees, that I wasn't just letting anybody come to work for my company. Again, those data breaches don't always occur online. It's not just a case where, I mean, you go look at privacyrights.org and look at the descriptions that they have there of data breaches. Many times it's a dishonest employee. It's an employee that gained access to sensitive information, and that could be janitorial staff. That could be anybody that works for that company that would have access to that information that turned around and then abused that access. They misused that information, or they were not careful enough with that information. They didn't lock it up like they should have. At that point, again, from a business standpoint, I would want to show that I screened those employees, that I was doing everything in my power to protect that sensitive data that quite frankly, almost every business maintains. There are very few companies out there that don't maintain some kind of sensitive data. Think about it, even if it's not for your customers, you definitely maintain sensitive data for your employees. You have to. You have to maintain W-2 forms and documents, legal documents with their Social Security information. I mean, that's something that a company has to maintain. And so, again, are we protecting that information to the best of our ability? That leads into another risk, which is, again, the hiring of employees. I alluded to that earlier. Think about just the general risks of hiring the wrong employees. And look at some stats here. 30% of all business failures are caused by employee theft. I mean, if my business is going to fail, there's a pretty good shot it's because I hired the wrong person. Businesses lose billions of dollars annually as a result of dishonest employees. This goes back to, again, that first slide that we talked about, fraud being a great risk for businesses today. But it's not like fraud did not exist 50 years ago, but it just seems like it's a little more prevalent in today's world. A large part, look at this third point, of reported data breaches are due, again, to a negligent act of an employee. Here's a couple more stats for you, and again, employee screening on hiring the right employee. Doing employee background investigations can save employers millions of dollars. Depending on the size of your company, how many employees you're hiring, and again, the job functions and access of those employees. I mean, we're talking about massive money that can be saved by hiring the right person. And again, at Harvard, we're not just about eliminating risk, we're about managing and really turning that into a profitable thing. If we can bring a program to your company that takes a risk and makes it a reward, then we feel like we're doing a good job. Then we feel like we are strengthening that relationship with your business, which is what we're all about, which is exactly what we want to do. Look at that last bullet point. On average, it costs between $7,000 and $40,000 to replace just one employee. So again, if we can bring a program that will save you that cost by making sure that you're not hiring the wrong person, that you're effectively screening those employees before you hire them, then we feel like we're doing a good job, that we feel like we're bringing something of value to the table. And let's talk about those employees. Let's take that one step farther. You hire the right employee. So here's the next question. Is that employee productive? And we have seen a decrease in general of employee productivity, where employees just don't seem to be as productive in today's world as they once were. Let's just talk about that for a second. What are some causes for that? What are some things that lead to a decrease or a lack of employee productivity? Well, certainly there are more distractions today than ever before. I mean, think about technology. 20 years ago, employees weren't getting online. They weren't playing solitaire. They weren't playing video games. They were not tweeting or Facebooking or texting. I mean, those are all things that have come about that have created a legitimate distraction for an employee. And we could spend an hour talking about employees that are addicted to Facebook. And I'll tell you what we would end up, after that discussion, you and I would end up seeing why companies are investing in things like giving an employee a cell phone. Why? Because it's cheaper to pay for that cell phone than to have the employee bring their own cell phone and, again, not be able to monitor that activity, not be able to have any control over that activity. We would see why companies are putting in measures to protect themselves, to again, not eliminate the risk, but to manage the risk of a distraction. of a technological distraction. I want you to think about the effect that employee absenteeism. There have been studies that say that employee absenteeism, just employees taking time off of work to deal with issues that they're facing, that employee absenteeism costs businesses over $100 billion a year. And so what are your employees taking time off of work to go do? I mean, obviously, no company out there has 100% attendance of all its employees, for lack of a better term. So employees are taking time off of work, and we give them sick days, we give them work days, we give them some time off, but we see that sometimes that is those days off are occurring at the wrong time. What is it in an employee's life that's leading to that? And then not only the absenteeism factor, but look at this employee presenteeism. And in recent years, there has been a lot of talk and studies done on employee presenteeism, which is related to absenteeism, but it's really the opposite. It's when an employee is not absent, but obviously present at work, when they're there, but they're not focused on their job. And again, there have been a lot of studies as of late, a great study by Cornell University saying that presenteeism can actually be 7 times more costly than absenteeism. A great article in the Harvard Business Review that talks about the cost of presenteeism. And it made the argument that when an employee takes time off of work, when an employee leaves and takes a day off, that can result in a 6% loss in productivity. 6%, why? Because if an employee, and think about it in a blue-collar arena, if an employee takes a day off, their work can be allocated to other employees. Other employees can pick up that slack. Even if it's for an extended amount of time, somebody can be hired on a temporary basis to do that employee's work. So a 6% for absenteeism, but presenteeism, said Harvard Business Review, can result in a 40 to 60% decrease in productivity. Why? Because if they're not there, or if they are there rather, you're not going to reallocate their work. They're just not going to be doing it. And so again, what is the true cost of presenteeism? And we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year for businesses around North America. So what are these reasons that employees are stressed? What are the reasons that employees are not productive on their job? Or again, in the case of absenteeism, taking time off of work? And there are obviously a lot of different reasons for that. It could be related to sickness. It could be related to general stress, things going on in their lives. At Harvard Risk Management for the last several years, we've been studying the effects of identity theft, and what we found is identity theft can be a leading cause of absenteeism and presenteeism. Because when an employee gets hit by identity theft, it definitely has a negative impact. There are going to be days that they take off of work to clean up that mess, and certainly they're going to be distracted while they're on their job. Just here are some numbers on that. The average victim of identity theft can spend hundreds of hours. And there have been all kinds of different studies that have been done that have studied victims of identity theft and concluded that they spend, again, hundreds of hours. Some studies say 140 hours. Some studies say 600 hours. Here's what we know. It's a lot of time that a victim spends in cleaning up the mess and restoring their good name. Certainly, if you've ever known a victim of identity theft, you won't argue with that. I mean, if you've seen somebody go through and be hit by this crime, and I'm not talking about credit card fraud. I'm not talking about they had their credit card compromised, where somebody got a hold of their number. That's not something that takes 100 hours to fix. I'm talking about identity theft. I'm talking about a victim that has new accounts open in their name, a victim that has been hit with criminal identity theft, where somebody has taken their information and gone out and committed crimes in their name, a victim of medical identity theft, where they have medical treatment being performed and the person receiving those operations, those procedures, is using that victim's identity. Imagine if you were in one of those positions where somebody was, again, committing a crime or getting medical treatment or working, seeking employment, getting employment in your name. Those are issues that are going to take a lot of time, dealing with the IRS, dealing with hospitals and doctors' offices, with HIPAA laws restricting the information that they can give you, dealing with law enforcement agencies around the country. You can start to see where the victim, if they're one of your employees, that's going to, in fact, totally negatively impact their performance on their job. Their productivity is going to suffer. And here's why, the second bullet point there, much of that time that's spent in the process of restoration occurs during normal business hours. You cannot expect an employee, when they get hit with identity theft, to go home and clean up the mess. Now, if they're going through some other kind of personal problem, a lot of that time that they spend fixing that problem, think about an employee going through a divorce or going through, a lot of those problems can be dealt with after hours. That doesn't mean it's not going to have a negative impact on their job or their productivity as an employee, but a lot of the time that they spend can be spent after 5 o'clock, after they get off of work. Not the case with identity theft. That's why it poses such a great risk to businesses, because the businesses that they have to call, the places that they have to visit, the places that they have to be in contact with, communicate with, are businesses as well, and they are open from 8 to 5, usually the same hours that employee is at work. So many of those hours are spent during business hours, and again, best case scenario, they take that time off, and you mark that down as absenteeism. That's not what victims are doing. They're doing it while they're on their job. They're doing it when the boss turns their back. And not only is it a decrease in productivity, but victims of identity theft experience high levels of stress. That negatively impacts other employees in the workplace. And just think about that. Have you ever worked around a stressed out person? Oh, man, identity theft is one of those things. They go to work, they talk about it, they bring everybody else down, they stress other people out. I mean, they're there at the water cooler talking about, for 25 minutes what they're going through, and it's not just that one employee that is affected. It's like a virus that spreads throughout the workplace. And again, it's not necessarily the victim's fault. I mean, they are the victim. But again, what can you and I do? What can our companies do? What can we do from a business standpoint to help manage that risk, to help alleviate some of the burden that an employee is going to face? And obviously, we are proud of the programs that we offer in doing that at Harvard Risk Management, the programs that we can bring to the table that help manage the risk, that help increase employee productivity, and really, at the end of the day, help employees be a little happier in their lives, not deal with the stress that they would otherwise deal with. Let's talk about another risk for your business. Take a step aside from identity theft for a second and productivity, and talk about legal exposure. Now, you talk about risks of the 21st century. Let me tell you, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, businesses did not face the legal exposure that they face today. Think about just very simply the risk of lawsuits. 40 or 50 years ago, people weren't trying to sue businesses left and right. 40 or 50 years ago, if you sipped a cup of hot coffee and you burned your lip, you didn't say, I'm going to sue. You just said, man, can I get a Band-Aid? What can I do? I mean, you look for a way to fix that. That's not the case today. I was in a restaurant the other day. Somebody slipped on a wet spot. First thing I did, looked around and said, where's the sign? Where's the little yellow sign that says that they're cleaning? Because if that's not out, boom, that's a lawsuit. That is the mindset that we have, especially in our society today. The risk of lawsuits has never been higher. Here's another thing to consider when you're talking about legal exposure. Does your business have access to sound legal counsel? So the worst mistake that we see companies trying to make is to be reactive, is to wait till something happens and then try to respond to it, react to it. Again, the best companies today are being proactive. They're looking to get sound legal counsel. Well, there's a problem that goes along with that. It's very expensive. It's very costly to get access to sound legal counsel. And most businesses don't want to, or at least they're looking to reduce the price tag of that. They're looking to get access to legal counsel without spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per month to gain that. We feel very proud of some of the programs. We have a small business legal plan that we can offer to your company that helps your business gain access to sound legal counsel. And one of my favorite things about Harvard Risk Management, one of the things I'm most proud of, these programs that we bring to the table are often offered at little or no cost to your business. And so for a few dollars a month, you gain access to some of the best legal counsel available. I mean, we have amazing programs for that. that reduce your risk of lawsuits. We have programs that can help with compliance. Think about the legal exposure that comes from compliance. Think about identity theft legislation and compliance. Well, that's a big topic. We could spend another hour just talking about compliance for your company. I mean, there are laws that exist today that if you're an HR especially, you have to be familiar with it. You have to know how they impact your company and what things your business has to do to be compliant with these laws. Think about work site posters. I mean, it's just things that you didn't have to have, again, 50 years ago, but that you got to have today. Going back to identity theft for a second, think about the identity theft legislation that has been passed in recent years. Because of data breaches, because of businesses losing sensitive data, there has been a whole host of identity theft legislation that has been passed. Well, whenever there's legislation that passed, that creates exposure for your business. And whereas 10 years ago, you didn't have the exposure with identity theft from a business standpoint, today you do. I mean, if you're not compliant with those laws that have been passed, you do face the possibility of fines, fees, and lawsuits. And here's a great quote from Business and Legal Reports. One solution that provides an affirmative defense against potential fines, fees, and lawsuits is to offer some sort of identity theft protection as an employee benefit. An employer can choose whether or not to pay for this benefit, but the key is to make the protection available and have a mandatory employee meeting on identity theft and the protection you are making available, similar to what most employers do for health insurance. You say, why is Harvard Risk Management so big on offering identity theft as a voluntary employee benefit? It's not just to protect your employees. That's obviously a big part of it, to help reduce stress in their lives, but it's to reduce your legal exposure from this identity theft legislation that's been passed. That helps your company just as much as it helps your employees. And again, think about their employees' legal problems that they're facing. So not just the legal exposure that your business is facing, but what about your employees' legal problems? I mean, right now, even law-abiding Americans are encountering potential legal situations an average of 4 to 6 times per year. Your employees are facing legal problems. And if you think your business has a hard time eating the cost or absorbing the cost of having access to sound legal counsel, think about your employees. Can they afford $300 an hour for an attorney? Over half of all Americans have a legal situation right now. Do you think that impacts their performance at work? You know, identity theft and sicknesses are not the only things that are leading to a decrease in employee productivity. Going back to productivity for a second, when an employee has a legal problem, it affects their performance on their job. We know that employees are, and that's being shown in absenteeism and presenteeism. People are taking time off of work. If you're in HR, how many times has an employee come to you and said, I got to go to court? I can't come into work. I got to go to court. I mean, whether it's a traffic ticket or whether it's some other case, employees dealing with legal situations are just not as productive. And right now, it's not just a traffic ticket. Americans are facing, because of our economy, some of the biggest legal challenges of their life. Think about foreclosures at an all-time high, creditor harassment at an all-time high. And again, we bring to the table at Harvard Risk Management programs that help to counter that. Here are just a few of the solutions that we can provide. I mentioned this, voluntary benefits. We offer identity theft coverage, group legal plans that help reduce that exposure, reduce those risks, employee productivity, employee stress, that are easy to administer, and the best part, they're offered at no cost to your business. So these are not programs that a company would subsidize. These are programs that are really offered minus the small administration cost. No direct cost to your company. We're not asking the company to pay for that. And that is one of the smartest things that a business can do, is offer those two benefits. That's why we put so much time and emphasis on those two, because, again, the reduction in legal exposure for the company, the increase in productivity, and they're just great benefits for the employees. They're benefits that the employees can use. I mentioned earlier we offer employee training on identity theft. We have documents that employees can sign. Many companies have brought us in to conduct safety meetings, not just workshops from an educational standpoint, but safety meetings that they can count as employee training, that they can prove that they have trained their employees on data breaches and information security. Harvard Risk Management offers those types of trainings. We have business legal plans, as I mentioned. I would invite you to get with a representative, a Harvard Risk Management representative, the person that invited you on this webinar, and ask them about our business legal plans. I mean, that's something if you're not familiar with, you got to take a look at. For a very minimal cost, having access from a business standpoint, not just for employees now, but your business having access to some of the best law firms in North America. Those are amazing plans, and quite frankly, in my opinion, one of the best values that we offer. I mean, you're talking about dollar for dollar, one of the best values of anything that we offer. We're proud to offer employee screening services. And so I would ask you, who's currently doing the background checks for your employees? And is that something that we could examine with you? Is that something that we could look at to compare against what we offer? And I think you'll be very surprised, very pleasantly surprised, very pleased with the programs that we can bring to the table there. And we also offer document shredding services. And so right now, if your company is not, if you're not shredding, or if you've got a shredder or two that you're just standing there shredding documents, we've got very low-cost solutions. And we've partnered with Iron Mountain, the premier provider of document shredding services, that really, for a very low cost, comes and provides a bin for you and shreds those documents on site. It's safe for the environment. It's one of the, again, smartest things that your business can do to reduce your exposure. And that's what we're about at Harvard Risk Management. Again, going out there, finding the best solutions in the marketplace that helps your company manage the risk that you face today. Our risks today are greater than they've ever been. And I want you to feel confident that your relationship with a Harvard Risk Management specialist, a risk management specialist, will help counter some of those risks, help prepare for some of those risks, help identify how these things do affect your company, and then again provide solutions at little or no cost to your business that can help you become more productive as a company and help your employees feel better and become more productive as employees. From all of us here at Harvard Risk Management, we thank you for taking the time to join this webinar today, and we wish you the very best.